got that. Thank you, everyone, and thank you. I normally don't like to start with these slides, but I suppose it is helpful to understand a little bit of background about who is speaking. So yes, been working across industry from Australian stock listed companies and then Fortune 500s across all of Australia and Asia as well. Even worked with not-for-profits and also the research sector. So yeah, have a diverse background of experience working in innovation and commercialization, but really how do we take our ideas and move them forward? And for that, that really comes to today's event that we'll chat around how we can really revitalise our program. But first, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians throughout Australia and their connection to the land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So what is this workshop going to be about? Really quickly. So the 10 steps to really get your innovation team excited, help you design the right sort of processes and culture so that we can have that, the ideas pipeline pumping. So we're going to go through some checklists and at the very end, a bit of an action plan around what to do next. So welcome to everyone. Let's get into it. Just to start off with, innovation as it is, innovation sits within the innovation system. So, and I think it's a really important process just to have the whole idea of what we're talking about within context, because if we can get this working, it works really well. And we know that if some of these elements are off, they can really, really impact on us. So that's what we're going to talk around today. Very much it's important, as we will speak, I think one of the big key things can be the real difference can be around making sure that you have the context. It's not just doing actions, but making sure you have context. And context isn't to not necessarily always peer-to-peer, chatting to others, maybe outside other organisations, because this one talks around a lot to do with our internal culture, the collaborations. How do we, our strategy and vision. I think it can be really important in the end to make sure that we have a vital system that is seen by everyone and impacts the organisation we are in currently. So that's really important one. And so I think this is a good one. And Ali, you'll read them out to me, please. So in the chat box, just in 1 to 2 words, what do you predict will be this year's biggest challenge? So to you, so is it to you might want to say it's the challenges for your innovation program. It could be the challenges that you see for your innovation role, or even your organisation. Just love to feel get the temperature in the room of everyone that's here around where are our challenges? What do we think? What are we thinking today are our challenges for this year?
Prioritising resourcing, time and focus, leadership support.
Yep.
Expansion to new partners. Concern from uncertainty.
Yeah, yep.
The challenge is probably focusing on one thing rather than multiple things at the same time. So again, that focus.
Yeah, I saw there was one around time resources, not enough time resources.
Yeah, portfolio approach, cultural shifts.
Yep, measuring impact. Yep, that's really great, and it's good to see. It's really, yeah. Oh, that's a great challenge. I saw that I've just opened it up as well. Lani just put one in, that desiring capacity to participate. That can be a real challenge to a system, can't it? That you might have, you might just not have people that have the time or the capacity. Maybe even sometimes the skill or understanding to really support at a current phase too. So that's just good to understand where we're at, the challenges, and for everyone to see that there's quite a diverse group of challenges there as well. I think that's also useful for us all to see that no one's talking around the challenges of where to take their 6 months leave off, what island are they going to be spending their time in the Greek islands. It's actually, we're all got the same challenges around how do we make our team better? How do we function better? So with that in mind, let's start. So, you know, number one is just, and these will be things that some will be absolutely natural, but maybe there's something here that just shoots a light bulb moment for you. So understand the new or update the organization's vision and strategy. And we've been talking with a lot of clients currently that the innovation and the whole real strategy of the organization has changed due to what has happened with COVID, and then maybe even if we call like the great resignation or the real huge shift that has happened. And we'll come to those themes, I think, throughout this, that really making sure, has everything changed, checking in with yourself that you are that you are really still aligned with the strategy, or is this strategy newly moving? Is it responding? Is it changing to this the new world that we live in, as we probably realize that we're never going to snap back to exactly the same, that we're going to be jumping forward to something new. And so as our organizations adapt, our strategies adapt, we really need to make sure that we're checking in with our organizational vision and strategy. And then are your programs and objectives actually there to help? Can you see really strong line of sight on the activities that you're doing currently? How do they align with this potential new vision, or just to really reflect on making sure that you can see how your actions are aligning with the vision and strategy, and making sure, again, can you clearly articulate how? That's the really important one, making sure that they are very implicit. People can see them, that you really want people to be able to understand that and see why you're doing that activity. It can't be too obscure, so that, you know, if the board or somebody asks why you're doing that, I think a lot of the time it can be making sure that we know that maybe people that don't have the depth of understanding in what you're doing can also see why you're doing that activity. That's where we can get to a point where you can be challenged sometimes. So the second one, reviewing your innovation system. So being able to take a check, to look at your innovation system and just have a look at it. So even the new status that people would have heard us talk around it a bit, but for maybe some new people here today, making sure you really have also considered things like the ISO innovation management standards, these new global standards that are being brought into Australia, and that so many other nations are now starting to embrace. So does your innovation system align with these? It could be a great way to check in. So conduct a review, however you want to do it. You can do that on your own. You can use some of our products and tools like the Innovation Navigator, but the important thing is to really check in and make sure that you've taken a moment to reflect on your system on a holistic point of view. I think that's a really nice place to start. Then this next one is something a little bit different, but really revisiting the 10 types of innovations. And I'm more than happy if people, you know, in the comments, people sort of put in either that they've never seen this before or wondering how this might work, but really understanding that this is where we could really get some recharge, some real energy and vigor into our innovation programs by overlaying something like the 10 types of innovation. And so that we can start to see that you sometimes can get, if you've got a large organization that is maybe centered around one specialty, if it's engineering or if it's in the not-for-profit and caregiving space, if you're around a single theme, then you can sometimes just get, when you're asking for innovations, really innovative ideas, but they may be more focused on products or maybe just performance issues. They may be more around thinking around just better ways to deliver what we're currently doing. Whereas being able to push this envelope by thinking of different profit models, how might this idea actually generate profit in a different way? How do we use our network in a different way? Could we rent things as opposed to purchasing them? Looking at completely different models can be an amazing way to really re-energize the ideas that are coming in. It's a fantastic way to refresh just the idea, and not to say that it's not good, but just checking in to say, could we extend this idea, build on this idea in a different way? So I just like the ideas of using something like the 10 types of innovation. I could,
and we've had, sorry, I was just going to say, we've had a few people that have mentioned that they've come across this tool or framework to describe innovation and how useful it's been. We also had a question come through around the ISO standards and just a little bit more information about that. So I'll just chat for those that are interested in finding out more.
Yes. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Any links? Yeah. So yeah, the ISO standards are a really interesting one for us to then be able to have a benchmark we're working on that allows the organisation to be looking at a global best practice, or at least a global language, which is a really interesting, and I'll come back just for 30 seconds. I just think the idea of that is fantastic, because so many times we can look around innovation as being difficult and hard, and it's all around taking ideas, and then to have a common language and a common process can be really interesting to start helping you turn it from a dark art into a professional process. So really encourage everyone to look into that. And yeah, on these 10 types of innovations, it can be really simple ideas, like for the example would be Boeing Airlines and even GE, General Electric, with their engines, and Rolls-Royce did the same thing, that they suddenly went to a completely different model. They didn't innovate the engine that pushes airplanes. What they did is they actually changed the way that they sold those, or they didn't sell them. They actually said, let's just rent them out. And so suddenly, and we can see it in the nature of what's happened with these new airlines, that suddenly a new airline can think, or even an old airline can think, okay, over summer, there's lots of interest between going from maybe Sydney to Cairns, we'll just pick in Australia, or Sydney to Singapore. It's never interesting for most of the year, but for a couple of months of the year, this is really where everyone wants to go to, using this new innovation, this new model that they've been able to have, that you can now hire the aeroplane and hire the engines, and you hire them for a certain number of operating hours, so that you can suddenly create this entirely different profit model. So suddenly you don't need to have the entire airplane full, because you're not having to pay off the airplane. You've just actually hired it for a certain number of weeks or months. And it's just a very interesting way to think around some of those ideas and then extend them to look at completely different models that can help with profit, can help with even how they get uptaken in the organisation. If you're suddenly not having to spend $1 million, that can be a really wonderful way to actually get momentum and movement. So then the next one is like reassess the appetite for risk. And this one can be really, can be interesting we should always be just keeping this thought in the back of our mind when we're working in the innovation team. Has something changed that could impact the organisation's appetite for risk? And then could it be, is there something that's changed that reduces the appetite for risk or activities within the innovation agenda? Has a new person come in at a hierarchy that they just want to see impact, or I just need something out the door tomorrow? Is that the language and message that's starting to flow through the organisation? I think this could be, again, just checking in on that appetite for risk, appetite. That then, do we need to look at this matrix and understand what activities we should be doing, or at least being able to articulate to internally, and very much to the people we report up to be able to show how the innovative activities or the innovation activities we're doing, how they fit into one of these categories. So at least it's not, I'm giving you a list of the 20 projects we're doing, but if you're suddenly able to say, from these 20 projects, as this last point says, I have a portfolio approach. Here's our portfolio approach, and these 20 projects typically all fit into the disruptive, or they're in the sustaining, because that's where we're currently at and what the CEO has asked for. It's a really wonderful way to be able to look at how you could get some comfort in what you're doing in your activities. And if you need to align or reassess, course correct some of those ideas. Are all the ideas radical? and absolutely crazy and fantastic in some ideas from a beautiful, innovative idea, but do they not necessarily meet the appetite for risk in the organisation? And that can be a really interesting thing to look at your pipeline and to suddenly think that 80% of the ideas that are in there are going to be really difficult to prototype, really difficult to seek ongoing funds to support and develop, because they're pushing you a little bit too far for where the organisation's comfortable with at the moment. And that can be due to the changes that have happened from COVID. That can be a whole lot of changes that have happened there, that have really hit the bottom line potentially. So this is a really interesting one, just to make sure that we're making sure we're managing that portfolio approach. And I just love that photo of Liam. Yeah. Understand your skills gaps. And this one comes to what, I was talking about the Great Resignation, and I would be really interested to hear how that has been impacting people across the organisation. Have you seen it yet? They've said for those that are within Australia, and that it's coming more to us now, certainly seeing that really happening within the US and moving into some of the areas now, reflecting across some of the larger companies, our larger clients within Asia. But I do think it's on the way. If it hasn't happened here, it's absolutely on the way. So, which can be a really, really critical thing to conduct this skills audit, making sure that, with the staff that you have, and maybe it is even if you then marry together the strategy. If the strategy of the organisation has made a radical change, are the staff that you have in those roles, are they currently skilled at the level they need to be to meet the new strategy? Or if you've lost people, do you have the same makeup in the team? So, what are your strengths? What are the current strengths and weaknesses? Do you have skills gaps to be able to meet the new and emerging strategies and opportunities that you're seeing and being told that you need to race after? Then this potential area around, what do you need to outsource? What training is actually required? Putting in place some sort of professional development plan for your innovation team, and it may even be broader for the organisation, so that you can foster a culture of people across the organisation that are skilled. And so, has anyone? This may not be a large issue, but I certainly can see this as being an issue from who we talk with. I'd be really interested to see if this skills problem or that has been shifting has come here yet. So yeah, because I have a very particular set of skills. That's really really interesting, because quite a lot of staff too. Not that many. No, that's in itself is quite interesting to if we don't have that.
We've got a couple of comments saying that this was already an issue even before COVID. And agreed it is important.
And if we look towards even those different, the way that we work, the way that we're delivering these workshops online, that both Ali and I, are working from home and have done for nearly 2 years. It would be 2 years now. It's coming up to 2 years in about 3 weeks. So that's how does that play out again in the skills and the ability to build culture around your team? I think that is all really interesting. But again, this whole point of the flexibility of our workforce is going to be really, really key, because we rely on the functioning organisation. The innovation team can't do it all. You're a small unit within a larger organisation.
So we've had a couple more comments, Pam. One asking if you could kindly share more about how to build innovation skills to influence culture.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at this, it's probably a two-pronged approach. Certainly, the more that people can understand, once you understand the strategy and where you're going, because that can be really key to it, is making sure that is the organisation expecting the innovation team to do this, or are they expecting the is it more a company-wide approach? So if it's that in building culture, it's really, I think it can be really key to make sure that people understand innovation and understand, and appreciate all different types of innovation. And what does your organisation accept as innovation? Some organisations accept, continuous improvement is a part of innovation, whereas, it could be just sort of bleeding edge, mind-altering innovation is the only innovation. So part of that is sort of upskilling the whole organisation to understand how innovation or thinking differently and problem solving can help, how that helps them in their daily chores, so that it's not just an add-on. It's actually it actually helps them to do their job if they identify challenges and they solve those challenges. But then conversely, it is really important to also be educating up. I think this is the critical point for an innovation team and the leads of an innovation organisation. You typically aren't rated if everyone in the organisation doesn't get innovation. But if your board doesn't understand what you're doing, if your board doesn't see how what you're doing connects to where they're wanting to take the organisation, that's where there's a problem. And so making sure that as gently as you can, getting them educated on innovation. How do they lead, innovation for leaders? How do they assess ideas? How do they communicate what they're wanting is also a way. And then how do they support ideas and foster ideas through the process? Because that's all part of this cultural problem. I worked with Petronas, so Petronas, but if you're their client and you work with them, it's Petronas in Malaysia, $100 billion organisation. And talking around innovation with the vice presidents, they hated the notion of it because they had tried it and they lost 300 of their top staff within a couple of months because they hadn't fostered the culture. People, respecting that ideas are very precious to people, and if we don't foster those ideas, they don't have to win, and nobody needs to get a medal. But if we have a process that fosters those ideas so that they are seen and heard and respected, then that's really key. So I think that's where it's around supporting the staff, but it's also around making sure that your leadership, the people that assess you, really understand what innovation is, so that you because they are where the culture comes from. And we could almost reflect back to that picture. I don't want to whip around and make everyone sick, but on that diagram, it really comes to leadership is key, and that a consistent message is also really key around culture. Anything else, Ali, that you'd want to mention there?
Yeah, so Scott's put a really great point forward around how do you foster an innovation culture in a virtual environment, especially working from home over the last 2 years. How has this changed, and how do we go about managing that?
Yep. So luckily, I'm working with Swinburne, which is one of the universities here in Australia, and they have actually created a whole program around the future office. And so we've been doing a whole lot of work. So from talking with them and understanding the nature, it's really interesting, the nature of work has changed. So they do say, that working online is if you don't do it the right way, is the hardest process for innovation. Working online is great because you can just sit in your own little lane and process like no one's business. You can be really highly productive knowing where you're going. But what is wonderful is when you bring people together to have innovative talks and conversations and to bounce off one another. And that's the challenge that they've seen with this remote work, is that we need to be able to have forums. We need a process to be able to bring spontaneous conversations alive. We need to be able to foster conversations, and that's really the hard process. That's where the flipping of the organisations, that some of the new theory is that you would actually only have head offices and offices around to bring people in for non-structured meetings, that it would actually be for interactions and conversations so that you can get the collisions. It's what CSIRO calls it, and a number of other sort of academics call innovation happens in collisions, when two different people hit and different ideas come together, and that's where the magic happens. So whereas what we used to do is structure that people would come into the office and we would have meetings all day long, whereas we're recognizing that that's actually the most critical time that you need to have unstructured play, like they talk with children, that you need to have unstructured play. Not everything is just in what you're doing for every minute of the day. It's really hard. There's lots of other things we could unpack on that, but it's really, really, really a good question. That work from home is really interesting. That clearly you could use other mechanisms. You can use other apps and everything to be able to engage and to keep these conversations alive. But just recognizing that, that the new theory, then the new knowledge is that that this process, that we've got this real process of working from home doesn't allow for those intersections. So we need to look at how do we just open up Teams meetings where we might have an hour where we just chat with no agenda. Because I think we would all find that we have just got so many agendas. We go from Zoom chat to Teams chat to Zoom's chat. What's the agenda of this time? But we typically taken out any free time within the organisation because we fear that people are just sitting on the couch playing PlayStation. So we have to highly regulate them at working from home. So I'm not going to be able to solve this. If I can, geez, I'd be on the speaking circuit making a shed load of money, I think, because that is a global challenge that's right there. But it's a great note, and I think we should try and even find some more people to talk on that. That would be a really good one, Scott, that we should probably deep dive into. So, yeah, making sure that we've got some sort of professional development. So don't forget, don't always focus down. Also think around how you can influence up. That's a really key part in your skills gaps. Hard to do, easy for me to say, hard to do, but think about it. How do you foster the people that are measuring you on innovation to make sure that they understand innovation at the best level, at a real high, highly functioning level? Then the next one, the decision makers, those influencers. And then are there offshoot key stakeholders that you have to manage? That's just, again, checking in. Has this changed? Has, as we've heard, maybe IT departments have amplified their voice within the organisation now that we're all working from home. Have there been different departments ballooned because of this? Really making sure that you understand these processes, that the mechanics of where you can walk around, making sure that you're managing your key stakeholders and the influencers, I think can be really key in making sure you understand who's calling the shots. You don't want to think that you've got one person happy, because there could be 3 or 4 others. And it's not hierarchical. It's not always just looking at the organisation, the org chart, and thinking everyone above me I need to manage. There can be some really key influences that sit across the organisation that can be really important. So could even be a really strategic client, a key client that could absolutely have a lot of voice. So an interesting one there. And then who determines the innovation program and where does the budget come from? Because does it sit, is it a direct line to you, or do other departments have some budget discretion to work on projects as well? So really understanding where all those buckets of money could come from so that you can actually have the resources you need to get things done. And that important one around visibility in your relationship with those people. How do you manage that? So sorry, Ali, I saw that there's a couple of...
Sorry, Cameron was talking to another Cameron in the chat.
Wow, okay.
Not for you.
And so how can you improve your visibility and or / your relationship with people? So making sure that you're doing, again, remember one of the notes that somebody said it was around being time poor, how do we do all the things? I think we really need to make sure that there's only 4 or 5 really key things we need to do. And that's one of these would be this, making sure that the decision makers and the influencers understand what you're doing, that can see and have direct understanding around how that activity impacts them, that if they can't get that, then that's something that we should mark ourselves down on and make one of our biggest priorities. This isn't for conversations in the team to sit there and to say to one another, gee, it's hard how no one understands how awesome we are. We're doing really brilliant stuff. That's okay, and that's nice to have, and we all need that from time. But if you aren't then understanding how you need to shape or communicate your projects so that these key decision makers understand, I think it's a real missed part of your activity. It's so critical to make sure. You can't be sitting there getting everyone to just understand how awesome I'd be if they just understood a bit more. I have that problem all the time. So, you know, it's a really important thing that we need to be making sure that they genuinely understand in your doing activity that is in their language, in all of these areas. I had somebody that was really interesting say, I don't know, I'll just say it as something that might help. For key influencers and stakeholders, this was a person that was very senior in a very senior position within the military. And he said that what he would do for these decision makers, influencers and key stakeholders would actually attribute, and you can't let anyone find it, but attribute animals to these different people. So to understand, are these people somebody that might be like an alligator or a crocodile, very thick outer edge. It's very hard to penetrate and get down into who they are. Or so making sure that you're not using light-hearted language with them, that you're making sure that you're communicating in the way that resonates with them. Some others can be, you know, making sure that they're owls, that they don't talk, they don't move quickly, but they just really assess everything. So making sure to yourself when you're putting in your report that you've got the data. You send a data sheet with your report, because maybe that's, those little things are really interesting to make sure you're speaking in their language and in how they assess, not just giving them information, which probably comes to another one of our points. How funny is that it rolls straight on to update your reporting process. So what are the requirements exist and what might exist in the future? Well, how would you need to do this? Do you have reports, dashboards, metrics that reflect the new requirement, that reflect maybe there's a cadence switch that the organisation needs to have more reports? So has that timing jumped up, that they now think everything's online, so they want to have online all the time visibility? How has that reflect your reporting impacted you? So then, do you have current software that can actually make this reporting and visibility of your activity? Think about that, and do you have accuracy within your data? That can be a really key thing around making sure you've got your processing. And yeah, I love the little note, if I'm always reporting, when am I working? So how do you get this process together so that you can have, as you're doing your activity, you're filling up another repository so that it's there to be able to report on. So again, checking in with the board, senior management, making sure that they're using the information. Do they use the information that you're giving them the right way? Would it be better asking them, would you rather a different type of report? I can always have these deep reports, but would you rather a more simple visual report? Is there something, can I report in a different way so that you can up the cadence of reporting but reduce the burden? That can be a really important one. So, and then definitely making sure that you're eliminating reports. If the board has changed, if your executive has changed, if anything has moved within your operations, making sure that, just checking in. Do I have to do it? Are you getting any value out of that? Could you drop the frequency back to monthly for certain things? Whatever you can do to buy yourself more time. But again, also things like software. Are there things that you can do that actually makes this smarter or easier for you?
And before we move on, we just had a question around examples of different types of innovation metrics. This is a common question we get asked all the time.
It is, isn't it? Do you want to go first? I'm happy, but I've done a lot of talking. So.
Yeah, sure. So it really comes down to linking it back to your strategy. So, and where you're up to with the innovation program as well in terms of your maturity. So you could be focused purely on engagement and cultural metrics. How many people are you involving in what types of activities within your program? It could be around portfolio and the amount of ideas that are actually coming through. So targeting, say, 100 ideas for a particular challenge and looking at progressing those ideas into 5 proof of concepts. Or it could be around financial as well and really measuring that return on investment. So in my opinion, it really comes down to, again, linking back to strategy and where you're up to in the stage of your journey.
And even broadening out that financial one to maybe even things like, are you saving money, or are you reducing waste? Are there other benefits? Are there things that you could report on out into the wider public, so that you could be giving reportable keynotes as well? So yeah, what do they value? But I think it is so hard. But again, it does reflect on the maturity, as you say. It does reflect on where you're up to in your process and what you're running towards. So yeah, make sure under that as well, what return on investment do you need? Just checking in to understand, again, is this, what does the innovation department need? Do we need to show that we're really we're starting to materialize ideas so that we are rapidly adapting the organisation to the current or the future state that is out there that we can see? So is that something that the board really wants to now be seeing, that some of these things are at proof of concept, some of these are now actually hitting the bottom line, or at least theirs as an announceable, so that there can be a ribbon cut as you're doing something? I think that's a really important one to check in on. What do you need me to deliver in 2022? And then how should this outcome be captured, measured and tracked? And so that's that whole process around the visibility of the action, not just doing the action. How do we need to capture it? Because again, for some of you, some of these proof of concepts and some of these things, this is where they can then start to bleed off out of your vision or out of your reporting lines, because you're then maybe handing them over to operations or somebody else. So that can be an important one to make sure how you might be able to still capture them, find some information on them so that you can be reporting, because you don't want to have all of your proof of concepts or ideas that are now handed and taken up. You'd still probably want a little bit more tracking on them to actually really capture the ROI as they're rolled out. So are you working to do more with less? Have budgets changed? Really important there to make sure that you're checking in with your return on innovation, that you're returning what needs to come back. Do you need to do less of some things so that you can actually have more impact? So, and again, do you need to, as we see time and time again, do we need to do an action to uncover something quickly? Is there a real quick win that needs to be won somewhere within the organisation, which can be a real challenge and something that needs to be there? Certainly if the organisation has shifted, certainly if you've moved senior leadership, or if you're moving in a directional change, it can be really, really important to make sure that the innovation team, you're actually getting a quick win out the door quickly, aligned to this new idea. I think that's it's always this portfolio approach, that you'll have to do some things that make a whole lot of sense, but also making sure you've got some things there that absolutely align with what's the current need. So then this unlocking innovation within the organisation. So are you looking to now reposition your innovation team as a service in the company? So, as opposed to sitting on a shelf or on a different unit, you're in a little cupboard with yourself and the innovation team. You're there, and people point and say that's where innovation happens. Are you looking now to sort of move and reposition yourself to more of a service that's out there across the company, that you're actually a real facilitator driving innovation across the organisation within different departments? And again, this is how you can empower innovation that happens across the organisation. So yeah, this whole idea of flipping it from a creator to an enabler It's a real mind shift. It's a real change. It's a significant change in an organisation, but this is one that can be seen to really be moving in a level of maturity, really, where you may have to be the creators just to get some things done initially, but all organisations in time, maybe, I don't think you can always have an absolute, but it does seem like a really good place to move towards, where you do flip into this service that you're there to help others and enable the entire organisation. So identify, engage, with your best supporters. Invite their ideas and feedback. I think that's one of these, and you might always already have it, but however you can start to identify and build a team of the willing. They may be beyond just innovation champions, people that you have formally put in as innovation champions, but really understanding, one of the key things is for a resource is understanding the people, the supporters across the organisation that are there as internal champions, that people that just love innovation, that are happy to give back ideas, that are happy to, even if they are people that are a little bit black hat, they're always happy to unpack their view, not just this will never work, but if they're able to give that, they're all making sure that you understand that this is a resource that your innovation team really has to lean on. So making sure that you have those and to fostering those, and if you don't know who they are, trying to be able to identify them as one of the really key areas that we've worked with some of our clients on a lot, so that you can actually get, when you need to pivot or change or get something out quickly, that you've actually got a number of people that you can lean on to actually get something out the door. And again, as an enabler, not as just you burning more midnight oil, having to come up with all the ideas as the creator. So it's a real step change. And then find ways to build innovation skills and knowledge across the organisation. How does it become part of the broader conversation? So again, is it through skills? Is it through activities? Activities through learning, doing innovation as an activity, a small sprint. Is there something that you can do to be able to really start to foster these conversations so that it comes into the everyday? It's a really great way to just slowly start building those skills and knowledge. If there's any questions there or thoughts or comments, this is certainly an order of magnitude harder for larger organisations, for people with multiple staff, but really critical too. And then take a good look around. I think this can be a really useful thing. Take a look at your competitors, your competitive landscape, but also probably what are the shifts and trends that are on the horizon with your industry, and then probably even think outside your competitors. Because if you'd have thought, if you're in the taxi cab business, you would have just years ago done an assessment of all of the taxi cabs and maybe looked and said, well, in America, they paint them yellow, and in the UK, they paint them black. And so, colouring seems to be an important one. So in your landscape, if you go to Hong Kong, depending on where you land, there are the red ones are for, are the red ones just for around the city? It's been a couple too many years since Hong Kong, but I think it's red and green, and they tell you, depending on where you want to go across Hong Kong Island, you use different ones. So we could sit there and say, if we just did our competitive landscape, it would look towards the types of cars. We would look towards Japan and go, wow, they don't need to open their doors in the taxi industry in Japan because they have automatic door openers. What you wouldn't have seen is Uber come along and eat your lunch. You would have had no visibility to the competitive landscape changing if you'd have just looked at your competitors. So really, I think for the innovation team, we need to be there way over that horizon, understanding, doing global scans, doing real important scans. We need to be a voice within the organisation of what's around. It's a really key role that we can look to be able to impact and influence. And then how will that, how will this impact your innovation strategy? So it's, again, do you need to look at it and say, well, wow, I can see there might be some significant changes in our competitive landscape. I might need to put in a portfolio approach of where we do some really crazy things. Like if we're a taxi company, we suddenly do a crazy project around creating an app, or at least a project around getting ourselves more of an awareness and getting some skills and education in this new type of rideshare initiatives or something. So I think this is a really interesting and a very hard part to do for organisations, but making sure that you're looking at that competitive landscape, making sure that you really have got the intelligence to understand what's happening and coming down the pipeline, and seeing something new in the media and knowing how that may actually impact your industry. So how does that impact your industry in a different way? I'd love to hear from people. It may be not necessarily the key defined role that you have, but understanding this and being able to articulate why you have in your portfolio, or why you might have rated an idea as something of interest to be looked at, is that you might be able to then say, because we've actually been doing this competitive landscape analysis, that we've got an argument that we can show to the executive why we need this in our pipeline of portfolios, because I'm actually looking over the horizon for us. That potentially could be something that's there, at least seeing if these ideas that you'll get currently, if they are very vastly different from what you're seeing in the trends, then that can also be a real interesting one to say, because people have to be good at what they're currently doing. You want the staff in the organisation to be key experts in what they're currently doing. But that doesn't mean that they'll need to be those experts in 10 years' time. The expertise could completely radically change. So I'd love to hear if that's something that people do already. There's lots of different places to be able to find this sort of information. There's lots of online. I'm trying to think of the organisation we align with, Springwise. Springwise can be a really amazing website for people to have a look at. It has some of the most amazing, it's crowdsourced knowledge from nearly every industry in the world, and it has mind-blowing different knowledge that's there. So it can be a really interesting one for everyone to think on around getting something like that, just to see what's coming well and truly over the horizon. So just conscious of our timing. It's looking like we're getting there. So the 10 steps were: understand the vision, review your innovation system, look at, if it's not 10 types of innovation, looking at some different methodologies to really challenge. TRIZ is another amazing process there. TRIZ, which is an amazing process to look at innovation, to challenge and work to add on to your innovation. Reassess your appetite for risk. Understand your skills gap. Clarify, again, who's calling the shots? Who do you really need to report to, and how? That next process, the how of reporting. ROI, always checking in to make sure that you're doing things to bring a return, not just in the 10 years time, but can you have a portfolio of returns? Do you need to have some ideas and announceables this month or next quarter, not just some revolutionary ideas that will happen potentially in 3 years' time? And have a good look around and unlock your organisation. Really look at how you can start to be someone that is a catalyst for change across the organisation, not just looking at yourself and thinking it's all within us. And the last one in the chat box, would love to hear if there's anything that's popped into your mind around from today. I'd love just a couple of words. Are you going to look at creating a common language? Make a decision-making matrix? Are you going to look at some new tools, or even look towards this market intelligence or PESTLE, or even skills and training? You might even design a skills and training program. Love to see in the chat if there's something from here that's popped up.
While we're waiting for everyone to pop their ideas into chat, another consideration to take into account when looking around could also be around working with your external stakeholders or partners. It's not just looking at competitors, but how you can work with other offices in different states or countries or research organisations to gather that intelligence.
Yes. A part of an association, yeah, global association.
So we've got incorporating PESTEL. We've got focusing on decision-making matrix and designing a skills program.
Thank you, Lani, for putting in the TRIZ. It's a very, very, very practical process created by an engineer who was Russian, who then emigrated to Germany. So it is very practically based, and it's amazing just to think that the notion is that there are, I think, 46 different sort of essences of innovation. Nearly all innovation in the world comes, or problem solving can be solved from these sort of base pairs. It's an interesting one. I love that. Yeah, influence the doers, influence up. I think that's yeah, that's great.
Building organisational skills and knowledge. Another example that we've seen with our network over the past year or so is building out a more challenge-based approach to expand the skills across the organisation. So in a virtual environment, being able to have a clear focus and common message around what you're trying to achieve out of particular challenges, and having a clear message around what it means for an individual to get involved in, and then being able to build reward and recognition. So that's another example of achieve that skills.
Yeah. That learning and growing through doing, through a real structured process, yeah, can be a really great one. So thank you, everyone. That's really great. I hope there's, you can see this, it's triggered some people like to think of some different ideas, and that's the whole nature of why we do this. So thank you. Is there anything else to say, Ali, before we thank everyone? And
I think that's all for now.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day, wherever you are. And we'll see you again really soon.